Well, as I said again, as the weeks progress, I'm sure we'll get an opportunity to deep dive into certain subject matters, and we'll get the opportunity to discuss that. Sort of key points for me then, we're on to now, would be to widen this out, because I'm very focused on, or we've been very focused on North Lanarkshire for the last hour and a bit.
Yep.
So let's broaden it out. General election fast approaching, 2 weeks as of today.
Yep.
That general election result will be known, and really in effect, we're looking in North Lanarkshire at really it being a two-horse race. That's basically it, between the SNP and Labour. I don't really see Tories making any inroads in relation to this general election within North Lanarkshire. Lib Dems, Greens.
It's actually a really good website called Ballot Box Scotland, and it gives
all politicians look at that website not to be fooled.
And that gives a fantastic breakdown seat by seat.
Yeah.
Not day by day, but each and every time there's a new poll, it goes up in that. So that's really worth looking at. But when you look at Scotland and you look at the Central Belt, I think you're absolutely right. It's SNP Labour, pretty much. You go up to the North East, you've got the odd pockets where it's going to be SNP and Conservative. Down into the borders, Dumfries and Galloway, Scottish Borders itself, you're looking again at SNP and Tory, and on the islands there's more of an influence of the Lib Dems on that. But by and large, you're looking across the board at SNP and Labour, and local issues I think are going to be really important and potentially really damaging for individual campaigns.
So on that
School transport being one of them.
Well, listen, on that point, I don't want to jump into school transport again just now. I think that we have to have an honest discussion about what's reported in the media, because if you were to believe the media, Labour has a landslide across the country, and people are desperate for this change. Personally speaking, my own personal opinion, Labour parties became Tory light, and really you're replacing one with the other. However, time will tell. That might be an unfair observation of mine. But point being to that is especially if we focus on North Lanarkshire, the candidates that are currently standing in North Lanarkshire, do we think, first and foremost, that the change that's been promised and potentially coming, is there anything exciting in it? Because I don't know about you, but the questions and the points that's been raised to me at the moment is, Greg, I don't know who I have to vote for. They're all as bad as each other. I wouldn't want to pick one or the other. Now really, if we look at this two-horse race, that basically the SNP and Labour are really indistinguishable, because really in effect there's an apathy out there in the electorate that they don't actually want to come out and vote in a general election. And funnily enough, that I've seen all sorts of discussions and things online where people are making very valid views and critical points that party machinery at that level just really takes away the opportunity for any individual to be an individual in relation to their campaigns, because it's all party lines, everything's party lines. Now, you make a point about it being local, everything's going to be about local issues and stuff like that. How do we feel? What's our general feeling in relation to the election? Is this better or worse?
I think this will be, and I might be proven wrong, but I think you'll find that the voter apathy in this particular election will be the thing that will maybe come across. And I think the turnout figures will be really interesting, locally as well as nationally, because as you've said, is that the number of people, I've never come across so many people who say, I'm politically homeless, I don't actually know where I'm going to vote just now, because there's too much similarity between Labour and Tory. You have views on whatever political party that happens to be there, whether your views have changed with the recent SNP trials, and whether that's tainted your views or not. The relationship with the Greens, whether that's tainted the views or not. But people are uncertain. So maybe you are right, Greg. Maybe it'll come down to local issues and maybe more local personalities. But I do think there is an overall party line, as we've talked about before, as to what that strategy looks like. But people in North Lanarkshire, being a resident, I'm looking for somebody that's actually going to be representative of what I want to see in local areas.
I think local issues may well impact on it. I don't think, from what I've seen so far, there's any local characters that have sprung forward as to light up the campaigns. It's insipid. Mostly, it's driven by Starmer. and ensuring that nobody drops a clanger. I don't really see anything that Labour have produced. I mean, from my viewpoint, it looks as if they are going to maintain the fiscal rules set by the Conservatives by and large, and that may well lead, ironically, and you can punch me from the side for saying this again.
I was going to say,
no,
no, a free punch.
It may lead to PFI Mark II,
All right.
because there's no public funds to build the infrastructure that the UK needs. And if there's no public funds to do that, and you don't want to raise tax, then you have to find that money from somewhere. So you may find that PFI or an iteration of PFI is used again, and that will only saddle my kids and their kids with mortgages for infrastructure projects that should be paid through taxation. And the final thing from my perspective is, if there was a genuine and meaningful desire to change how politics operates in the UK context, they would do away with the House of Lords. Now, Labour promised this in 1997. They promised that they were going to reform the House of Lords, they were going to do away with hereditary peers and all the rest of it. But they didn't. And in fact, by the end of Tony Blair's tenure, he had made more appointees to the House of Lords than Margaret Thatcher had during her period. So Labour and the Tories need the system as it is to support each other.
So on the balance of power, I'm sorry to interrupt you, David, but I know you're going to come in. But on the balance, this election balance of power and how this is all going to sort of play out, do we think Swinney has steadied the ship? Do we think that the SNP will fare better under his tenure?
I actually think he's done all right.
I mean, the Swinney effect.
The Swinney. I think. I mean, I don't see the same.
You want to buy a stamp.
But you don't see the same headlines.
No.
So there doesn't seem to be the same disaster going on within the party as there was under Humza. So I think he's levelled I think he's steadied the ship a wee bit and probably put them into a place where they feel a wee bit better about themselves. Do I think that it's going to make a major impact on the outcome? I said at the beginning of it, when the SNP were in a really low place, that they would be fortunate to come out with about 18 to 20 seats. I'd probably up that to 25 at this point. But I think Labour are absolutely going to run away with it. They'll run away with it down south.
Yes.
The Tories are going to be wiped out. I think Reform will have a big impact on their vote. And up north, the electorate, and I don't want to be disparaging too much about the people up north and in Scotland in particular, but many people do see Labour as an alternative. And I don't know where that comes from, because they are the status quo.
I think, Dave, I'll come in to let you in just now, but I think that people have put their trust in a party like the SNP for the last number of years. We're sending MPs down there, we're seeing absolutely nothing really in the way of change. We go down with a key mission, and that key mission was to sort of look at the opportunity for another referendum and down there to advocate for independence for the people of Scotland. Yeah. But what we're getting is, every single time there's an election called, the same roadblocks, we're getting the same challenges, legal challenges, etc, etc, etc. So maybe it is a case that people are just looking going, what is the point of voting the SNP now? Because ultimately what we are doing, and let's not kid on about it, an MP's salary is quite significant, then they get their expenses and they get everything else. And if you're putting down, say, 48, 49 MPs for one political party, then really in effect, what main difference if you are an opposition third largest party within that chamber? How are you making change? I've actually seen nothing really come forward, apart from a couple of key bills, but that would be about it.
I know locally it's difficult to make change. Yeah. We know that ourselves, and bringing forward which are reasonable, costed, competent kind of suggestions. Yeah. That for whatever reason, and maybe that's another one for a different discussion.
And reasonable.
And that's and for whatever reason they never see the light of day. But to me, if you're looking at the actual candidates locally, and that is an issue, because we're talking about North Lanarkshire. I know we've widened it out. You talk about Douglas Ross jumping on that decision to run for Westminster, but if I don't, I'll stay where I am. And I mean, that's got to come back and bite his backside, surely, I would have thought. But, you know, he's made the shout and he's made the decision for whatever reasons. But, I mean, locally, you would have thought or hoped that maybe within North Lanarkshire, you would have seen more profile for I think there's 3, maybe there's 4 candidates, I don't know.
Within North Lanarkshire,
Lanarkshire.
1, 2, 3, I think it is. Yeah, you've got Frank McNally, Kenny Stevenson, John Leckie.
Yeah.
So it's 3. I think that's it.
That's it.
Okay. So the 3 that's decided to throw their hat in the ring, you would kind of think that, I don't know, for me there would be more volume or more profile in the local stuff, because that's still to me what people want to actually hear. And the only thing that's unfortunate, and I don't know the gentleman, Frank McNally, but the only sort of local stuff that seems to be coming out is again round about this school transport basis where, you know, states one thing and then votes against. It might be the party whip system that we've exhausted, you know, through this as well. But and he did have the guts to take the questions and make comment within council.
I did ask him to clarify.
So
clarify
you know,
points.
hats off that.
Do you think he's come out well at the back of the school transport issue?
I still think he's going to get in, but I think this has damaged him.
Yeah,
I do. I think it's damaged his Frank's reputation as a kind of straightforward, plain speaking, upstanding member of the community and all round good guy. I think that's tarnished. At this point, and that's what it feels like. That's what it feels like. And
it's not personal.
when it's absolutely not. On a personal level, I think Frank McNally is a really good person, and but you have to judge people on how they vote.
Yeah.
And if people vote in a way that you deem to be detrimental to you, your children potentially, then you will exercise your democratic right.
This is kind of the
When you
point
go to
that I'm
ballot
making.
box.
Do we want elected officials that are just going to conform to the whip system, and as soon as they go down there, get their big pay and they get their big expenses and have that London lifestyle, and then all of a sudden never to be seen in the sort of the constituency again? That's the question, because I think in North Lanarkshire we've witnessed that far too much. I think we're seeing that considerably about how and this isn't me being disparaging to these individuals. I think that
Well, it was a point that was made for the gallery. I mean, these good folks that were escorted for the gallery last Thursday, one of the points was you'll pay at the ballot box or it would yield.
Actually, I was in one line last night, and when I was sniffing through my own page and stuff, and obviously you get these things.
Personal page.
My personal page, I'm just highlighting. I wasn't trolling either, just to make that very, very clear. But it was I don't know what you would call it, but a sort of your homepage kind of thing, where stories and that kind of thing come up, and I seen that there is a Facebook page for Save NLC School Transport or whatever it may be, and they were still very vocal in relation to Frank's campaign, and within that they're saying that they're going to publish letters and they're going to publish other stuff and get that through the doors so that people understand exactly that was what took place and this was the way this vote went.
You know, at any election time that's there, you kind of reflect and you look back and say, can people have a go at you and say, what have you actually done with your time?
But I think when the polls are so in the favour of Labour this time around, that really in effect the fight is for the SNP, and that's not me, by the way. I need to be honest, I'm not being critical of any candidate here, but it is an honest discussion about, well, if they're so high up in the polls, what does an SNP, who is an MP, SNP MP, have to do to make sure that their position is safe? Because really in effect, look, listen, we know, and let's not kid on about it, you're only as good as your last campaign, you're only as good as your last case, you're only as good as your last thing. So really in effect, where would that leave you as a potential MP candidate in this race?
I think those who voted SNP in particular are going to be reluctant to give their vote. That's my own personal feeling. I think there is a lot of disillusionment. There's individual characters within our ward, within the constituency, who are currently facing charges at court, prominent individuals, and all of that comes back to the party. And I think the visuals around when Sturgeon was, you know, under scrutiny by the police, and the house was like Fred West's house, as if there was dead bodies underneath it and everything's taped off and cordoned off. That, I think that has had a lasting impact and image on the electorate, because and it was in the news so often, it was so repetitive about the camper van, and if it's not about the camper van, it's about ferries. If it's not about ferries, it's about NHS waiting times. If it's not about NHS waiting times, it's about educational attainment in school. There's a constant kind of Scotland bad message that comes from the big media outlets. I don't want to name any of them. We all know who they are.
I'd just like to have seen a more local focus with any of the candidates and what they'd actually done locally, because I still think that's what people judge them on. And I think whether it's school buses or whether it's, you know, whatever local issue that happens to be there, is that's what people just now. I'll guarantee that the people that were escorted to the chamber last Thursday are highly unlikely to be putting a cross next to Frank McNally's name, I would guess. And it's issues like that I think people will vote for.
Stephen is due. Every single time school transport came up, he always voted for school transport.
He knows.
So, but again, there's a wider thing here as well, that obviously we've got another two candidates potentially in this race. Kenny Stevenson.
They're doing shots.
Up against Annam. And again, same questions. Annam done enough? Do we know enough about Annam to think that she's potentially going to get in again? Or do we think Kenny could maybe sneak it?
Don't know enough about Kenny, personally speaking. Don't hear him speaking at council all that often.
That's true, to be fair. Kind of quiet profile character.
That's not to say
but that's what he says he's not working hard.
Absolutely. I mean, he could be the hardest working councillor in his ward. I don't know enough about him. I mean, Annam, I know a wee bit about Annam because I worked for Annam for a bit. And her and Annam's public profile, she does a great job for her public profile to make sure that she's out there. And you know, if you look at her output from her social media,
do we think it's going to be a tight horse race between? And then again, is John Joe Leckie standing there?
John Joe Leckie,
he's from kind of Shorts area, isn't he? John Joe.
Don't want to say what seat it is because I'm not entirely sure.
I'm sure it's that seat.
Anyway, he's representing the British
Unionist Party. Is that John Joe representing? Okay.
So I don't think John Joe, no disrespect to him, is going to be successful.
But again, that kind of puts it back to local issues. John Joe is a very prominent sort of local councillor.
All the time.
And speaks all the time in your council. He's never shy to.
So for political geeks like us who love to analyse the numbers, well, listen, in fairness, I think that when we get the opportunity to look at that, because ultimately there is a lot that goes in when a candidate stands, and obviously there's a number of factors that are at play, and it's about analysing those factors and how that result ended up. So I will be looking very closely at how John Joe does, because again, as a local candidate with a very strong voice, in my opinion, because whether it's shooting for the hip or whatever it may be, he's coming into a chamber and contributing. So again,
I almost feel like trying to organise a bus with shots just for John Joe, because every day I've heard him sitting and give him his due. It's a major issue for him, and it's obviously a major issue for folks in Shorts about bus transport in and out. You know, so
maybe I think Labour win it across the UK. I think Labour win it. The proof of the pudding as to whether or not this mantra of change that Starmer is putting forward, which I don't think is going to transpire. There's no fiscal headroom, as I understand it, to implement.
But is there a desire for it either?
No, there's not, because they don't want to. They don't want to lose Tory votes in England.
No,
that's it. There is a scramble around for Tory votes in England, so the Labour Party has to be as Tory as the Tories, and that's just a fact. And at the moment, the pendulum has swung, as it did in '97, well away from the Tories towards Labour. So they will win. What I want to see is what was Boris's mantra during the Brexit was that
That mermaid speech.
no, it was these summer.
Can I help you?
Oh, I can't remember the name of it, but anyway, it's about this positivity that's going to come after a Labour.
Or the Boris Bounce.
Call it Boris Bounce, but it's like summer headlines or whatever it is.
I remember.
And people are going to be waiting on this massive investment because I think that's what people think is going to happen.
Yeah.
With Labour at Westminster, there's going to be massive swathes of money coming towards the Scottish Government to be distributed then to local councils, and that's not going to happen.
No,
I think people in North Lanarkshire, I'm going to bring it back to North Lanarkshire again, is that I think back to my grandfather, and he would absolutely be turning in his grave as a Labour supporter for as long as I ever knew that he was a Labour supporter, as to what the Labour Party looks like now to what it was when he worked in the Clyde Alloy and in Ravenscraig and everything else, and everything that was attached to that. It would be unrecognisable, the stuff that has been put forward by Labour in relation to how it looks in terms of Conservative Party policy as well. And you just think in there, as people in North Lanarkshire, in fact your motion, Greg, last week touched upon it in terms of the miners motion that we get, and it was won and won handsomely. And it was maybe just that. It was, and you expressed surprise at that point that the motion wasn't brought forward by the Socialist Labour Party.
oh my.
And it was nice to hear a couple of people being, Labour councillors supported so
Give
strongly.
them their due there, elected members gave an impassioned
But people just don't see that difference now.
speech in
You know,
relation to that.
and that makes it a much more difficult
But
choice.
do you think Labour, and again obviously it's not for us to decide, but I do think as well it's very, very evident now that the Labour Party isn't the same Labour Party for the 1980s.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think that political parties will change, but is there too much divergence now into the sort of Tory-like aspect of things that they've kind of lost their way? The two of them are inseparable.
Look at North Lanarkshire. We've got a Labour leader and we've got a Conservative deputy provost. And you think, my grandfather, I mean, you were a former office cheater.
On that point, I found it staggering that deputy provost had an official event at the Summerlee Mining Museum, and how that event unfolded. I think it absolutely bizarre. And again, we have minor memorials across the authority. How's that decision been made about who attends that for the administration? As I said again, these things. They've got to be spoke about. We can't.
No.
That's the individual that's doing the job, and I've no disrespect for him. Absolutely none. But
We had a councillor in the Ravenscraig ward who was Conservative
did we?
last term.
Who was that?
Megan.
Well, Megan. So it was. So it was.
Yeah.
So even in heartlands,
Yeah, we're changing.
we are. I don't know whether we're forgiven Tories or
I don't think proportional representation.
No. I think it's more about the binary nature of Scottish politics. I think we've when you look at the Labour Party now, anytime I see Keir or whoever it is, they're draped in the Union Jack behind them.
Yeah.
So we've jumped into bed with the Tories in terms of this Britishness that, let's face it, 50% of the Scottish population don't recognise. I mean, I'm speaking personally. Anytime I see the Union Jack draped around the politician, I'm going the other way.
Yeah.
Irrespective of who they are, because it's not my country. I'm Scots, and I like my own flag.
So to come back on your point, 40-year anniversary, the minor strikes, a profound moment in history in relation to workers' rights, in relation to fair equal working practice, etc., etc. And you're right in what you're saying, the Labour Party wasn't the people to propose that motion. It was little old me that had to bring that forward because there was no plan on the horizon to even look at that. I find it absolutely staggering. But I found more staggering, we're going to come on to this now, our political moments of the week. But again, I find it absolutely staggering that when that motion was being presented, the number of interruptions that by stating the historical context to us, the political context to us, that all of a sudden, no, we don't want you to speak that motion anymore, do you know, why don't you just nod that through, that's a motion, we all vote for it, thanks very much, and away you go.
Yeah.
And I found it absolutely staggering that that was allowed.
And you were interrupted very many times.
Yes.
Very many
Yes.
times.
If people get the chance to look at that, honestly, they should look at it, and they should look at the interruption, they should look, I'll give you a due, the passion that you were putting into that, but obviously it was uncomfortable, and it was uncomfortable because of that association again between the Conservative Party and the Labour Party within North Lanarkshire.
As it is now.
Well, as
and
it is
a
now.
shared administration.
And that's where it was uncomfortable, and part of it.
They don't like being reminded of that relationship. It's a rather bizarre setup, and it is really bizarre. We've got a deputy provost who's a Conservative. We've got the leader of the Conservative Party in a convenership position.
Yeah.
We'll not even get started about the independents. I think there's a few of them on critical roles, and everybody all gets enhanced payments. And then
You've got a convener, a Conservative convener in the administration as well.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
But see, okay,
But they don't like to be reminded of any of this.
No,
And by the way, if it's a duck, it quacks like a duck. It's a duck. But we're
I'm
not
with
allowed
you.
to call it a
And
coalition.
it was in one of the motions.
It was.
It was in one of the motions that was brought forward because it identified the remuneration that individuals in the administration
Yes.
can enjoy.
Yes.
Now,
Yes.
if you're in the administration and you're a deputy provost, for example, you will receive additional monies
Yes.
and to
Well,
represent the fact that.
you're doing a civic
Yeah,
duty, so
absolutely.
that's absolutely fine.
And if you are a convener of a committee,
Yeah,
then you will receive additional remuneration
yeah.
to reflect that as well.
Strange bedfellows, but it is very strange bedfellows.
You don't have an issue to your point that, but and again, you can maybe talk about it in RD, but effectively when you've got, because it's the council leader that ultimately, as I understand it, controls that kind of budget or the allocation.
appointments.
So he makes the appointments, he makes the within that budget that's for the enhanced payments. But how can you say that the council chamber is representative and democratic when you have a Conservative deputy provost getting paid an enhanced payment, you've got conveners who are Conservative getting enhanced payments, you've got leader of the SNP
Well, that's right.
she gets enhanced payments, and it's not about the money. The money's, but if you're receiving that, I'm sorry, but that puts you in a position of, does it keep you impartial? Does it keep you totally aside to follow your own agenda?
This is the question.
It's one for another
No,
day,
no, I
but it's
don't
always-
think it is. I think we've kind of touched upon it, so let's explore it. So the point being
Members of the public won't know that this happens. They won't
know
understand
any
it.
of this, right? So let's break it down into simplistic language. All right, let's bring it back. Right. So what you're telling us, and what you're telling us in your explanation here is, we've got the leader of the SNP group, who is the main opposition,
Yep.
gets an enhanced payment.
Yes.
Right. Who makes that decision?
As far as I'm aware, the council leader. Jim.
Right. We have a minority group within the Conservatives, where there's 5, and may I just add our political group has 7, but I'll not dwell on that.
Yeah.
But the 4th largest party in the, or the last largest part of group in the authority, and their leader gets an enhanced payment for being a convener.
Yes.
We have a deputy provost who is a Conservative and gets an enhanced payment.
Yes.
Then we get to independents, and those independents and minorities, there seems to be a wee bit of debate in whether or no there's a convener. There is definitely a convenership in there for licensing, as
Yes,
we know.
yes.
And then the others were kind of a wee bit, and there's a grey area.
There's an NHS appointment that gets an enhanced payment as well, I'm sure.
Numerically, in the chamber, because one of the biggest criticisms we've got about the council is any councillor really makes any sort of free vote or free opinion. So really, in effect, it could be criticised that this position is by design, because ultimately, as the leader of the administration, what you would then have is a block vote as you go.
Well, it can only be by design, because if you've got 2 independent councillors that are not associated with, let's say, the Labour Party that's there, and you've got the Labour Party council leader making appointments that could, in theory, have been made appointments to his own councillors within the Labour group. Mm-hmm. So why would you do that? What is the point?
What is the point?
What is the point in offering out these enhanced payment positions when they could have been kept in-house?
Well, the interesting, but this is the thing about it, you've got a group of say 30 odds, they've got 40,
37 or 38.
37, just shy of 40. And really in effect, what does that tell the talent within that group? That, by the way, for power, we're going to have to get this and this and this. And by the way, within our group, we don't either have the skill set to match that, or it is purely political.
Yeah, I would be annoyed. I mean, if I was a member of the Labour group and Conservative councillors were receiving enhanced payments and remuneration, and independents were receiving enhanced payments and remuneration, and they weren't part of it, I would be unhappy.
Seeing that blip when the SNP were in administrative control.
Yeah.
Who was, I can't honestly remember whether the deputy provost or the provost or the convenerships, were they offered out to other independents? No,
they were retained.
They were all
in-house.
Which, okay.
Yeah, because I went on holiday to France as convener of adult care and social work, and come back.
Nobody understood why I never got that.
And come back and
You were disbanded.
well, pretty much the administration was pretty much gone. There was
at the end of July. Yeah.
So again, the numerical aspect of the chamber. So Joe Bloggs brings a motion forward, and that motion is actually quite prevalent. It's a good motion, and he wants to get it
relevant and costed.
Isn't all the words that we thrive on. But again, the point being as you bring that motion, because I think it's important for the general public to know that exactly this is the process, and I think we'll deep dive it a bit more, because we're just getting a simplistic explanation to this at the moment. But as I said, I think that if Joe Bloggs brings a motion forward, competent, costed, etc., gets it to the floor, and it comes in at the floor, and then all of a sudden we see certain individuals vote with certain individuals, but you're always guaranteed that block vote of Conservative and Labour and independents.
Right.
And that's the question that I would like to deep dive the next time that we meet, and we'll look at that in detail, and we'll look at the voting patterns, and perhaps we'll look at what motions have been brought forward and never seen the light of day.
And what ones haven't been allowed, and the basis of why they've not been allowed. That'd be another interesting topic.
And then I think the other interesting topic in that is how these motions are scored for competency, because that's a big thing.
Well,
that's a big thing.
They're not, but let's go there another
2 weeks is a long time in politics. So God
very
knows what
long
we're going
time.
to speak about next week.
What is the point?
What's the point?
What's the point? Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you.